And here we are. Hooray. So can I admit something to you? I don't eat octopus. I have this.
I don't blame you.
Superstitious belief because I learned how intelligent they are at some point. I just can't. I can't think of them as food. And you're welcome to think of me as a hypocrite because I still eat like chicken and beef, even though I think birds are cool and cows watch sunsets. Cows have best friends, so it doesn't make any particular, it's not morally consistent of me to refuse to eat octopus, but I just don't. That's just a thing for me. I
totally agree with that. What is that dish they have, like the dancing octopus, where they squirt the soy sauce on it and the salt makes the connections so that their arms wave around? Like, that's just grotesque to me.
Oh, that's not nice at all. I wish I didn't know about that.
So, on that happy note,
let's go ahead and do our introduction. Hi, I'm Rose.
I'm Nico.
And this is Robot Elf Book Club. We read and discuss newly released science fiction and fantasy books. On this episode, we are going to be discussing The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Nayler. This book was published by MCD and released October the 4th, 2022. We're going to talk about the three primary narrative threads of this book. Take a quick break for an intermission, and after the intermission, we'll do spoilers and discussion, etc., etc. And Nico, would you care to read for us the plot synopsis that is provided for this particular novel?
Rumors begin to spread of a species of hyper-intelligent, dangerous octopus that may have developed its own language and culture. Marine biologist Dr. Ha Nguyen, who has spent her life researching cephalopod intelligence, will do anything for the chance to study them. The transnational tech corporation DIANIMA has sealed the remote Kondao archipelago, where the octopuses were discovered, off from the world. Dr. Nguyen joins DIANIMA's team on the islands, a battle-scarred security agent and the world's first android. And just as an aside, that is a terrible sentence. It's trying to say that Dr. Nguyen joins the DIANIMA team, which consists of a security agent and an android, not that the islands are a battle scar. Anyway, you get it. It bothers me. Bad writing annoys me, especially when it's part of their marketing. But anyway, back to the synopsis. The octopuses hold the key to unprecedented breakthroughs in extra-human intelligence. The stakes are high. There are vast fortunes to be made by whoever can take advantage of the octopus's advancements, and as Dr. Nguyen struggles to communicate with the newly discovered species, forces larger than DIANIMA close in to seize the octopuses for themselves. But no one has yet asked the octopuses what they think, and what they might do about it. A near-future thriller about the nature of consciousness, Ray Nayler's The Mountain in the Sea is a dazzling literary debut and a mind-blowing dive into the treasure and wreckage of humankind's legacy. Did he write this about himself?
I was about to say, I think the person that wrote that synopsis didn't actually read the book. Like maybe somebody told them about the book.
I even take issue with it being described as a near future thriller. Like including a skull does not make it a thriller. I'm sorry, it's not a thriller book.
It's primarily a series of conversations, occasionally punctuated with drone violence. Yeah. Wow, that sure is. We say this every time. That sure is a description of this book. Can you remember a time before you had started reading this book? Can you remember in your innocence what maybe were your expectations going in?
I first read the synopsis and I was like, oh, so this is going to be like Arrival, but the aliens are going to be actual octopuses. And I don't think that was that inaccurate. I feel like the aliens in Arrival were benevolent and the octopuses in this are kind of pissed off, but for good reasons, because humans are dicks and we keep eating them and then fucking up their houses. But other than that, yeah, I didn't really know what else to expect going into this, and I did not get what I expected. So
Yeah, I skimmed a few reviews, very glowing reviews. We talked about this a little bit in email. I mean, multiple people saying, "Oh, this is for sure, going to make the Hugos, and it's really beautiful and exceptional." And as I admitted, I have my own sort of ideas about octopus intelligence and what that means. I'm kind of superstitious about it. So I was really into the subject of this
Yeah, I
book.
was
And
super excited for it, actually.
yeah, we're super
Because
excited.
I took after the slime mold discussions last time, people are going to be like, "Who are you?" But so my whole background is that I started off in veterinary medicine as a technician, and I went from there to a biology/psychology degree, focusing on neuroscience, but also focusing on animal behavior. So we studied cuttlefish and all sorts of things in animal behavior classes, and I was like, they are freaking awesome. And cuttlefish are actually considered less intelligent because they're squids. They're considered less intelligent than octopuses. And some of the things we talked about in those classes, like they were there's some videos of this that you can find on YouTube, but they basically like cock block each other when they're mating and stuff like that, because they can change their appearance, right? So the one male will swim between the other male, a rival male, and a female. And on one side, it'll change itself so it looks like, oh, I'm just an innocent female floating along here, do. And on the other side, it's like, hey, baby, come flirt with me. And so it's like stopping the rival male from seeing the female, and also like smoke screening while also trying to flirt with the female, right?
Wow.
And so that was we were discussing that, whether it was a case of deception. And of course, you can't anthropomorphize the animals, blah, blah, blah. It's important not to do that. And I totally just anthropomorphize them with everything I just described. But there's lots of arguments about whether that is intelligence or if it's an instinct and all those sorts of things. So I found all those discussions very interesting. So when reading the description for this book, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And then it wasn't.
Yeah. That is interesting about cuttlefish too. I have shamefacedly, I have to admit that I have eaten cuttlefish before, but I feel tremendously guilty about it.
Cuttlefish have been subjected to human psychology experiments, and they have passed tests that sometimes human children don't pass.
Oh, wow.
So it's really interesting, some of the things that people have done with them.
Oh, man. I'm a monster. I was at an Asian grocery store a few weeks ago, and I saw the cuttlefish snacks, and I was like, oh, they're so good, but no, I'm not going to do it. Yeah, let's see. So that there are 3 interconnected narratives in this book, which make it really difficult to split into the 3-act kind of structure that we've been doing here on the podcast. And so I think what I would like to do is talk about each narrative thread, the main characters in each narrative thread, and kind of go through a little bit of their story. That I went back through the book and I took a lot of notes, trying to outline, major plot points and, thematic
I'm glad
elements.
you did that.
There's so much. There's so many little details, and I want to actually, only touch on the big points, because otherwise this podcast is going to be like 6 hours long, and nobody wants to listen to that. And I don't want to talk for 6 hours about this book. I want to be done. So let's talk about our primary character, who is Dr. Ha Nguyen. She's from Vietnam. She is a cephalopod biologist. Studied at Oxford and has done this academic work. She takes this job for DIANIMA, which is this big international like mega corporation that kind of has its fingers in like a little bit of everything. And the CEO and like head honcho of the DIANIMA Corporation is this reclusive figure, Dr. Arnkatla Minervidotter Chan, which is a name and a half if anybody ever had one. I think she should.
In my notes, I'm not pronouncing anything in this podcast.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm not going to pronounce any of these names, right? I'm sure. But so let's call her Arnkatla. So she's this reclusive, like eccentric tech person, thought of as like a brilliant researcher into artificial intelligence. And there are excerpts of a book that she has written placed in between all the chapters of this book, which are they're sort of interesting. They're a little bit dry, but she talks about, developing artificial intelligence and what her motivations are and stuff like that. I didn't take any notes on any of that stuff. I'm just going to put that out there right now. So DIANIMA is this huge corporation that has its fingers in every kind of pie. They do all of this like AI development, like drone technology type of stuff. And Dr. Nguyen takes this job for DIANIMA at the Con Dao archipelago. Con Dao is it's an area in Vietnam that had been like a wildlife preserve, I think, / tourist destination. And it also had been the former site of like a prisoner of war camp during previous times. So just a lot of history in this particular area. DIANIMA purchases the archipelago and cuts all the residents a check to relocate, and is like, move along now, we're taking over here. And they set up a research outpost there. So Dr. Ha Nguyen arrives in a drone-piloted hexcopter. She gets dropped off at the archipelago, and she meets the security guard, who is Altan Setseg. I'm not pronouncing that right, but that's my best attempt. Who is a Tibetan woman. She is described as being like 2 meters tall. She's massive. She's kind of imposing. She doesn't speak English, and so she uses an automated translator unit so she can communicate with Ha. And this translator that she uses is kind of primitive, and it translates her language very badly. So she kind of sounds like an orc. So she's this, this massive, like tough looking woman. And, she greets Ha Nguyen, in this sort of very, very brusque way. So that's how she makes her, her entrance. So Dr. Nguyen has taken this job. I don't know how much she knows about what's going on at the archipelago. I think she knows about the octopus. Like, obviously she knows because she's hired because she's like a cephalopod researcher. She knows that she's joining a very small team. And she has kind of some bad memories about her previous research job where she had been studying a cuttlefish population, and things kind of went sideways, and the cuttlefish died. And I suppose we'll kind of get more into that as we discuss here, because the details of that kind of come out across the course of the novel. The other member of the team leader, is a person named Evrim. Evrim is an android, is a singular creature, the world's only conscious artificial intelligence. Evrim was a project of Arnkatla's, and apparently inspired a lot of riots around the world because people were very angry about the development of a conscious artificial intelligence, very fearful about it. Laws are passed. There are assassination attempts that happen on various DIANIMA executives over Evrim's existence.
I feel like that would not be my first response, to like self-immolate myself because someone created a conscious android.
Yeah. They mentioned somebody set himself on fire in front of the Vatican over Evrim. But I guess they were really mad about it. So this is Evrim, the android, is the team leader at Con Dao, and they're the only 3 people there. The preserve is completely empty. Other than that, the security guard monitors the premises by use of these drones that she's just kind of constantly monitoring. There's a Buddhist temple there, and there are some robot monks they're patterned on actual Tibetan Buddhist monks, but they're AIs. And there's a discussion about whether or not they're conscious. And Evrim says no, and actually finds them a little bit disturbing and kind of primitive. But the monks, they do religious practices. They do like chanting and stuff, and they take baby sea turtles to the water to make sure the sea turtles, survive, which is a problem that they had before Kandao was shut down by DIANIMA. Like there's park rangers on the wildlife park, but they get paid really badly, and so something that the park rangers do is they poach, or steal turtle eggs and sell them to tourists and stuff like that. And so, since there's nobody there except the robot monks, there's no poaching going on.
Those are the actual minds of monks that lived, right?
Right. So. Yeah. They were like patterned on the actual minds of monks that lived. And some of there's not a whole lot of, they're not on the page a whole lot, but they do interact with the team, the research team a little bit. And the kinds of things that the auto monks say seem very natural and very human to me. So, I mean, I think that you're intended to come away from that with a little bit of doubt, as to Evrim's conclusion about, they're not conscious. They're automated.
Yeah,
they're following routines.
Confused. I was a little confused about Evrim's response to them, but I mean, we can talk about that later in the spoilers section. But he describes them as repulsive, and I was like, why? What's repulsive about them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even he says that to Ha. It's kind of it might be similar to the way that you might feel repulsed by a monkey, and she's like, I'm not repulsed by monkeys. What are you talking about? That's weird.
But that's another thing I have in my notes for discussion is like, why does this book hate monkeys so much? Because even when Alton Setseg is using her translator, she says, I didn't want you to think of me as a battle-scarred ape. And I was like, so if you can't speak in complete sentences, that makes you a monkey.
Exactly. What? Like, why? Yeah, I mean, Alton Setseg's justification of using the terrible translator is that it keeps people at a distance. But also she didn't want them to just think she was a brute. I don't know.
It was all a very confusing detail to add that I didn't really understand what the payoff was.
Yeah, here's what I noted about the auto monks. Their AI is patterned after real Tibetan monks who exist on the island to help baby sea turtles reach the water. Ha asks if they're conscious, like Evrim, who says it's debatable like the concept of consciousness itself. Their minds are extraordinarily complex and layered, but they're mostly just routines. Each of them is a neural mapping of the mind of a Tibetan monk who actually lived. They're walking repositories of memory, yet they have no apparent will of their own. Their present state is automated. And Evrim finds them unsettling and says that they are in a degraded state, a failed attempt. Let's see.
So the narrative of the book kind of jumps between these three timelines. So we have the Kandao location with Ha and Evrim and Alton Setseg. And then we have these other two lines. So describing this is going to be a little bit disjointed.
Yeah, let's talk about Aiko a little bit. Aiko is the main character of the second narrative thread. And he is a young man recently graduated from university. It sounds like he wants to be a computer programmer. He's from Okinawa, and his parents have worked really hard to put him through school. And he comes to DIANIMA's headquarters, which are located in a place called the Ho Chi Minh Autonomous Trade Zone, which is quite an acronym. Assuming that he's going to do some touristy stuff for a day, and then he's going to go, to the DIANIMA office building and knock on the door and say, hey, are you hiring? Can I have a job with you? So he, on his first day on the island, he gets into an auto taxi to do some touristy stuff. And it kind of bumbles around the city for a little while. It's not going the direction he wants it to go, and it stalls out and stops responding. So he's in the process of trying to figure out how to call for help and or complain to the taxi company when some guy like leans in the window and holds a palimpsest screen in front of him. There's our word from last episode. There's all these palimpsest screens throughout the book, which are just like little flimsy terminal screens that I guess hold projected images, basically. And this guy's, he's advertising prostitutes. And Iko he doesn't have anything else to do, and he's stuck in this neighborhood, and so he's like, okay, and so he
would also not be my first response.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm stuck and stranded. Oh, hey, hookers, cool.
So right,
yes, just not me.
He avails himself of some female company. It's unclear exactly what happens after that. Maybe he gets drugged or something. When he comes to, he is on board. He's on board the Sea Wolf, which is an automated fishing vessel. It's piloted by an AI mind, and he has become a captive member of the fish processing crew. So he's a slave now. He doesn't exist anymore in the real human world. He is now in the floating world of the sea, where he is doomed to slave away for Automated Marine Protein Industries, Inc. Yeah, and it's a pretty bad existence, as you might imagine. He mentions that on the ship there are signs that there used to be robot equipment like strapped into the working areas to do the fish processing, but obviously it was too expensive to maintain the equipment, so they tore it all out and replaced it with slave labor instead. So, yikes. I did find it a little bit, this is an aside, I found it a little bit, you can tell me that I'm being silly. I don't know that I think that seafood harvesting, it has much of a future. Just, given that crab season had to be canceled this year because 11 million snow crabs are missing. I don't know how much longer we can continue to anticipate that there will be, seafood to harvest. But
just depends on whether we can evolve a fish that can live in an acid sea.
There you go. You know what we need? We need fish that eat plastic.
Well, we're getting there.
Oh,
we got bacteria that can eat plastic, but like not enough of it.
I love living in hell world. So Iko is a slave on a fishing vessel. He leads a pretty miserable life. He spends his time working on a memory palace. He read this book about a Japanese inn, and so when he's trying to remember details about the ship to squirrel away for future reference, just in case it ever becomes useful, he sort of puts every different fact in a different room, and so he's using this to remember details. Let's see. Go to. I mentioned the robots.
I don't think we've mentioned Rustum yet.
No, we'll get to Rustum. There's guards on board the Sea Wolf. The guards are brutes. They make sure that the slave crew stays in line. And at the start of the book, Iko has been on board the Sea Wolf for 2.5 months. Let's see. The ship's AI is housed in its wheelhouse behind reinforced steel doors. The ship is named WOLF LARSEN after an old film. And I looked up the plot on Wikipedia. Let me tell you what the plot is. A mean-spirited ship captain keeps his crew under his autocratic thumb while indulging his more refined side. But when his men rise up in mutiny, Larsen forces the cultured Van Wyden to help him quash the uprising. This is foreshadowing.
It's not even foreshadowing. It's just like literally the plot.
It's basically what happens in Iko's storyline. And Iko, he makes friends with another crewmate, a young man named Thomas, who had been a graduate student before he was captured and brought on board the ship. Thomas tells him the ship's AI controls the engines and the navigation. It decides where we go and when. It follows the fish and the profit. So,
So who?
Go ahead.
This just doesn't even make any sense to me, because who is like running these operations, and is there just one company that just roams over the entire sea grabbing every single fish, or are there competitors? Because like, are there no regulations? Like, there's slave labor, obviously, so not that much. But what has happened in this world?
Yeah, it's not. We don't get a clear idea of whether there are competing automated marine protein harvesting companies. There is a story that the crew members tell each other about an AI-powered ship that runs aground, and the crew escapes, and they go to the authorities, the local authorities, and they demand, asylum, to be sent home and stuff like that. And the local authorities like round them up, stick them back on the ship, and like put the ship back out in international waters, and wash their hands of it and say, this is illegal immigration, whatever, which seemed too real to me. It seemed very plausible. So it's just like it seems like nobody wants to be involved with it over much. They just kind of look the other way.
Because in the synopsis for the book, it says forces larger than DIANIMA close in to seize the octopuses for themselves. But who is that?
Who could that be? That's why
DIANIMA seems to own everything.
Yeah, they own everything. They own literally
there's no
everything.
One larger than DIANIMA right now.
Exactly, which is why I think the person that wrote that synopsis didn't read the book. Because
the synopsis didn't mention the fishing ships or Rustum or hacking or anything at all.
No.
And yet and it takes up so much of the book. Anyway.
Yeah, so
let's continue.
The important thing about Thomas is that Thomas like gets hit by a slack line and thrown overboard and is lost at sea. Sad trombone. And so Iko, that's a very important moment for Iko. He decides that he's going to remember Thomas, and keep moving forward, in order to be someone who remembered him. You know what I mean? And remembered that he was a person that existed in the world.
Yeah, this concept of a memory palace that Iko uses is a theme sort of throughout the book, and it's also a theme in psychology. So I thought it was interesting that it kept getting brought back in, but then there wasn't really a big payoff for it in the end, I felt.
There's a little passage here in one of Iko's chapters that I wanted to touch on here. There's a recurring theme in the book of there being sort of like touch points, points in someone's life where they have an epiphany and they're like a different person on the other side of it, right? Or they have a different outlook on the world. That just something just transforms them. And this is a bit from one of Iko's chapters where he's thinking back to what his life was like before he was on the Sea Wolf. And it says, on one side of the darkness was the Iko who had come to the Ho Chi Minh Autonomous Trade Zone looking to get rich. On the other side was a slave. He realizes no one's looking for him. And even if they were, what trace is left for them to find? Soon enough, the crew understood that the things that had given them security, families, states, laws, futures, and pasts, were all located on a solid planet, a planet of land. In this never-ending world of lawless water they were trapped in now, none of that existed. And one of Iko's crewmates is a Vietnamese man named Sun, who is a former resident of Con Dao. This is important. Sun had at one time been employed as a park ranger, and had engaged in some small amount of poaching, lost his job doing that, and then briefly was employed as an assistant at a tourist, like, what would you even call it? Like a diving tour type of
Like scuba adventures or whatever.
scuba
They
adventures,
dive down
yeah,
into
whatever.
wrecks.
And he has an unfortunate encounter where he and his boss like take a tourist down to the wreck of this Thai ship at the Condau archipelago, and the tourist dies underwater because something apparently like seized his equipment and like tore it off when they were down in the wreck of this ship. So that was bad, and the scuba operation has to close shop soon after that. Bad press, but Sun tells the other laborers on the ship, the charity wing of DIANIMA that bought Condau from the ATZ has cordoned it off. It's safe, my home. These soulless ships travel the world, scraping the last of the fish from the sea, making a desert everywhere. But Condau is safe now. The fish are safe. The dugongs and the seagrass and the reefs are safe. The turtles, all of them are safe. And another thing about Aiko's story is that he feels really regretful about his life before. He feels like it was his lack of empathy, that led him to make decisions, foolish decisions. And he feels like being on the Sea Wolf is like punishment for the way he lived his life before. So let's move on to
I feel like going with random prostitutes after you've been dragged into a dark alley is punishment for is what led to your punishment.
Yeah,
of being
I mean, and
trapped on a slave ship.
it's really sad because after he's on the Sea Wolf, he realizes that probably those prostitutes were slaves too. They probably didn't have any choice about the work that they were doing. But
he still had a choice to not go with them and get dragged.
Yeah, if he had cared, if he had been making decisions by considering other human beings as creatures deserving of empathy. Let's talk about your favorite character, Rustem. Tell me about Rustem, Nico.
It almost made me quit this book so many times.
Okay, so Rustem is a Russian. He's not a Russian. He's a Tatar, but we're going to call him a Russian. He's a Russian AI hacker. And we meet him when he's having an interview with a woman whose identity is obscured by a technological device called an ab glans. I wasn't able to figure out what that maybe stood for or was derived from. But this is a device that basically pixelates her face in real time. So you can't see her face, or she can't be like photo identified or whatever. And it's something that it's like a really expensive device, and it's something that would be used by like a spy. It's not something that everybody has, but she goes out into the world, using this, and people kind of like keep a distance from her. Like, I don't know who this lady is.
When I search for ab glans, I get a German to English translation of reflection or distant echo, which might be where that came from.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Because it's kind of reflecting all the stuff from around her, so you can't see her face.
Yeah,
so it's
kind of
it's like a pixelated, like censored video, but on her face as she's walking around.
Yeah, and she can set it to like project like an AI generated face, I guess, if somebody like doesn't want to just see like a scrambled like nonsense where her face would be, but whatever. The way that we know this woman is the same person every time she appears is, she's using this device, but her fingernails are painted gold and the tips of her fingers are stained like a platinum color. I was never really sure what that was supposed to signify. So Rustem is having an interview with this woman whose identity is obscured, and she is asking him about some high-profile AI hacks that have taken place in various places around the world. Like, some AI was like hijacked and used to, assassinate this person, and oh well, I don't know anything about that, but certainly the person who did that must have been really sophisticated, whatever. So he's kind of just like denying that he knows anything about this. And she slides a terminal over to him and she's like, I want you to just take a look at this and tell me what you think of it. He spends half an hour inspecting this diagram on the terminal. And he looks up at her and he's like, it can't be done. Whatever you want to do here, it can't be done. This is too sophisticated. And she's like, well, I think you'll find that there's a large sum of money deposited in your bank account, and you should go ahead and try for us, and keep the terminal. So this is how we meet him.
So that whole chapter just made me think of Jurassic Park and Nedry.
Oh,
meeting,
yeah.
The other guy, and he gets the can of Barbasol, and I don't know, like, why. I guess I know why, but it was just like, oh, so that's his role, and then that's not how it really worked out. But
let's see.
If only he had died being eaten by a venom-spitting dinosaur, it would have been a better book.
Gosh, the next Rustem chapter is actually pretty deep into the book, it looks like. That's kind of surprising. Oh, and his next chapter is the one where he hooks up with a girl. And he tells her all about what an awesome hacker he is. And he's on this super difficult and super secret job he's been hired to do. This young woman's name is Ainur. And they apparently, like, they don't know each other very well. They just like hooked up, and she introduces him to her point 5, which is a slang term for an artificial intelligence partner. That's projected out of a little device, out of a little Oculus. The purpose of the point 5s is to serve as like a half of a partner, right? For somebody who's maybe like too busy or too challenged to have a real relationship with a real person who has like their own needs and the ability to make their own like choices and stuff like that. It's just like, it's like a chat bot, basically. It's a really sophisticated chat bot.
I can totally see that being a market in the near future, though, like an AI sex bot that can actually respond to you.
Yeah.
Like, those are going to sell for lots of money.
Yeah. He ends up feeling like a third wheel, while she's having this conversation with her 0.5 or whatever.
Because the attention wasn't on him for once.
And he's like, that's cool, I gotta go. So the interesting thing about Ainur and her 0.5 is that Dr. Wen has a similar device. And her 0.5 is named Cameron. And it hadn't been pointed out to us prior to this point in the book that Cameron was an AI. It just seemed like a person, like an academic, with his team of grad students. And she just has these conversations with them. And then we realize, oh, this isn't a real person she's been talking to in her free time. So
every single Rustem chapter is just Rustem being like, so I'm really good at hacking, guys. Like, I'm so good at hacking. I am the best hacker in the entire world. No one else is as good as hacking me. And everyone's going to try to kill me because I'm just so good at hacking. Yep, they're going to try to kill me soon. Yep, it's too bad that they're going to try to kill me. It's pretty sad that I'm going to die because I'm so good at hacking. It's just like, oh my God, shut the fuck up, Rustem. I hate you.
Yeah, he keeps seeing this girl and he tells her more about his project. And there's some point where he's having a conversation with her and he sees something that looks like a bug land on the wall behind her. And he realizes it's not an insect, it's some kind of tiny drone, and that he's being surveilled. And he's like, let's change the subject. And then he has another meeting with the Abglans lady. And they go to Istanbul. And they have something that they're working on there. And he's like, well, let's, now that we're done here, like, let's go back home. And she tells him, there's nobody waiting for you back home. And if there's no people waiting for you back home, and you should keep your mouth shut if you don't want to lose anyone else. So he understands at this point that whoever he's working for, has murdered his hookup. This is a dangerous group, and he doesn't know who this group is or who this woman is. All he knows is that they've hired him to try and hack this tremendously sophisticated AI, which is pretty obviously Ephraim. That was my initial thought. Like from the first moment he's on the page and he's being hired to do this AI hacking, I'm like, oh, they're trying to get him to hack Ephraim. Okay.
What was the purpose of hacking Ephraim, though?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the problem. Everyone's like, oh, yes, we're going to monetize this, but he's like, Ephraim's so reviled that people are setting themselves on fire. So why?
I just don't. Rustam concludes that the group that has hired him wants to take control of Ephraim. They want to find this back door, which Rustam calls a portal. They want to find this back door and take control of Ephraim and use him to murder somebody who's at Kandau. Which, maybe is Arn Katla, but she doesn't actually go to Kandau until 70% of the way through the book.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know. It didn't make a lot of sense.
It was never made clear, who she was working for. There's some suggestions, but yeah, it's really didn't care too much for that.
Have we even made it to the octopuses yet in this synopsis?
I got to a chapter that says octopus chat, but like I kind of don't want to go too much into like the octopus language and stuff like that, because it's really cool and it's the best part of the book, and I don't want to ruin it for anybody. But also because it's not the main theme of the book. I felt. I didn't even really feel like this book was about the nature of consciousness or the nature of intelligence. I really felt like the central theme of this book was empathy versus indifference, right? And we talk about how freedom means having choices, being able to make choices, having agency. But we don't, when we're making choices effectively, we're not making those choices in a vacuum. We're not making those choices without having a thought to the people and the creatures that are affected by those choices. Like that's the worst kind of automated system, the worst kind of AI that, is fed Excel sheets and maps and, data, fishing harvest patterns and weather patterns, and makes choices about where to get the highest yield at the lowest cost is going to be, without consideration to the ramifications of those choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I've summed that up pretty concisely, but this is like a 300 some odd page book. And I just kind of keep making this point over and over and over again. Rustam connects with a detective, I think, when he's in Istanbul. And the detective seems to have some ideas about who Rustam is working for, and tells him a story about how in the Ottoman Empire there had been a tradition of just looking after animals in general. And there would be like monasteries, specifically dedicated to, helping injured birds and stuff like that. And that the streets of Istanbul were full of stray dogs and like stray cats that people would just look after. They just sort of considered it like a communal duty to look after those animals. And then sometime around the start of the 19th century, It's decided that this is kind of a backwards practice, and in order to be a modern nation and accepted among other modern European nations, they need to change this practice. And so the municipality rounds up all of the stray dogs and puts them on an island and leaves them there to starve to death and die. And some people feel really awful about this, and they try to take food and water to the dogs, but it just kind of prolongs the inevitable, in that they kind of feel haunted by the spirits of these dogs that died in this terrible way. And then the common takeaway from it is that it was a mistake to do that. It's sort of like, well, why do you bring this up? Well, no reason, But the detective sort of links that anecdote to the organization that has hired him to hack Evram, and suggests that they're members of like the Neo-Ottoman Stork Society, I think is what he says. They're like this radical animal rights group that has an interest in the octopus of Kandao, and they they think DIANIMA is up to no good. They're probably right about that. And they want to like murder humans in order to protect that population of animals. And Rustem says, well, that kind of sucks. I don't think an animal's life is worth less than a human's life, but certainly a human's life is not worth less than an animal's life. I mean, so this isn't cool. And he's looking at what they're asking him to do, and he decides that he's not going to go along with what they want. And so, he kind of hems and he haws, but eventually, makes like he's going to hand the terminal back over to them and like tell them that he has what they want. But at the last minute, he's, when he's about to hand the terminal over to the Abglands lady, he sends like a weather drone after her. It hits her at like 300 kilometers an hour and sends her into the bay. Like, and she just dies. And okay, dude, I'm glad that you made a choice that you feel like you can live with. I was sort of expecting to learn her identity at some point, but we never do. He's, Rustem is just like this, this android it's a work of beauty. It's a singular thing, and I'm not going to turn it into a weapon. So I'm making my choice and putting my foot down. And I think one of the themes of the book is that violence is morally neutral. Like, there are times when it's called for. There are times when, it's important to be decisive. Right? There's so much. The cool stuff with the octopus is it's great. But I don't know how much it has to do with like the themes of the book. I'm struggling here.
Yeah, you are. I did not write a very good synopsis, so I'm not helpful.
Oh,
in this
no,
part.
it's fine. It's fine. I know that you had kind of a different reaction than I did. I think you were a little annoyed by the book.
I was annoyed by many things in the book. Primarily just the writing in general, which it annoys me even more to see so many reviews praising the writing when I felt it was actually quite amateur.
There were a lot of sentence fragments. I don't care for that.
And there was head hopping, which is where you have a point of view from one character, and then like halfway through the paragraph, it's a point of view from another character, and you're like, wait, who's talking now? Like, it was very confusing. There were spelling mistakes, which is just an editing issue. But
I didn't.
Well, like on the ship, in multiple locations, it would say, "Oh, the line was pulled taut," but they spelled it TAUGHT.
Oh no!
That is not what that word means.
I didn't even catch that.
But mostly just the info dumping drove me nuts.
Yes.
This whole book is just overly didactic. It was like bridging into arrogance and preachiness, and there were literally chapters where it was like 10 to 15 pages where there's like a sentence in the beginning where like character A walks up to character B, and that's literally all that, like the only action that happens. The rest is just like character B mansplains something to character A for 15 pages. And it's just like, are you still talking? And then there's no speech tag. So when it does change speakers, you're actually, wait, who was talking? You have to flip back 8 pages to find out who's talking. It's just, it bothered me. And then like my final note under the writing section is like, if you boil this plot down into major points, how much actually happens? And that's why I was like, I hope Rose wrote a better synopsis for this, because my synopsis is like, Ha Nguyen is called to the island of Kandao to consult on something, and 30% of the book later we find out it's an octopus.
Yeah, there's so much of this book that it's just huge amounts of info dumping. The stuff about the octopus intelligence and how octopus might actually develop like language, I thought was really compelling. I thought it made a really good case for that. But as far as this being a narrative, I mean, it just kind of was all over the place. And it just wasn't clear to me. It just wasn't clear to me what my takeaway should be.
And for how exhaustively researched this book is, there's a lot of things that I disagree with. Like they're actually just kind of like wrong, or they miss something that's like really prominent in these fields of animal behavior. They're just like, oh my God. So one of my descriptions here is that the parts that aren't preachy are like if Neil Stephenson wrote a book about octopus consciousness. It's like, there's lots of research and there's chapters and chapters of characters standing around just to exposition for 10 pages about a concept. It's kind of tedious. But when Stevenson does this, it's really clinical. It's like a documentary. This book is just pretentious. And I feel like the author had said in the epilogue and in an interview that he has like a bibliography because he felt like he had done so much research. He wanted to represent that somewhere, but he didn't put it in the book itself. And I feel like, so the author said in interviews and in the epilogue, they wanted to have a bibliography because this book is basically a research paper and they wanted to credit all their sources. But a research paper that's like a quote unquote novel, it's kind of a research paper that you write when you don't want anyone to check your work. And I didn't appreciate that a lot of the speculation that's presented in this book is presented as fact, especially because if you went, hey, wait, actually, that's not true, they'd be like, well, it's just a fiction book. It's just a novel. So that felt very disingenuous to me. And that just put me on the annoyed spectrum to begin with. So I was started being annoyed by that. And then all the sloppy writing just made me really annoyed. I had a strong reaction to this book. I wrote that I have reacted positively towards the negative, as some might say.
I want to... go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's really disappointing because it was one of the highest rated books that we were considering for this month. And it was like almost a good story.
Yeah.
But it was impaired by all these things. And it's just like documentary, but then, it's a thriller, but no, it's not very thrilling. And okay, now we're going to talk about this again. And it was not good.
It's really not much of a thriller. I want to talk about how the 3 different narrative threads come together at the very end.
Do they come together?
Sort of. Okay, so there's a mutiny on board the Theewolf. You know, there's like a whole thing. There's a lot of there were some really poignant moments when the mutiny leader kind of has this breakdown and Iko talks him out of it, and he later jumps overboard because he can't live with the guilt. Son, the Vietnamese man, the former resident of Kandao, is talking really loudly about how abundant the fish are at Kandao and how stupid and slow they are because it's a preserve and there's no fishing there. And strangely enough, the ship hears this and decides to go south to Kandao.
And this is, again, I don't understand how this works because it's a preserve, so you can't fish there. So why would
right? Yeah. So you would think that the ship would conclude that that maybe it's not smart to go to this this corporate owned outpost that is likely to not like me being there. So they breach the perimeter of Kondao, and Altentetzig unleashes her army of drones that destroy the sea wolf. Somehow Aiko and Sun jump overboard, and they get a life raft, which is the whole thing. There are a lot of interesting points in the book where it seems like the sea wolf is making decisions that aren't simply logical, decisions that seem, desperate or motivated by some kind of emotion. The life rafts were locked up and protected by the AI, and so the crew couldn't escape that way. They couldn't just get onto the life rafts. The ship had to release them, and the final act of the sea wolf, as it's sinking below the waters of Kondao, is to release the life rafts, which seems, a benevolent gesture, I guess. So there's all these question marks about whether the sea wolf was sentient or not.
Well, there are a couple of things that I had highlighted, because it said the ship, I don't know if it was a ship or a ship, the ship had failed to catch any fish and gone mad and decided that protein was protein. Mm-hmm. And so a fishing ship at some point in history had started processing humans. Can an AI go mad? What does it mean to go mad?
Yeah. That is interesting. Yeah, that's one of the stories that the crew members are telling each other. That's where the story about the crew that tried to escape and got put back out to sea is mentioned in that same section, as an anecdote that would may or may not be true. But yeah, that's an interesting question. Like if an AI goes mad, like what does that look like? And I guess that's not really new territory. I mean, that's that's a 2001 type of stuff, right? But yeah, so the sea wolf's last act is to release these lifeboats, and Aiko thinks no matter what the calculations, it felt like mercy. And he's also, simultaneously in this moment, he's being horrified by his friend San's plan to encourage the sea wolf to go to Kondao and get destroyed, because it resulted in basically the deaths of all the other crew members who were murdered by drones. But they got off. They got out. They got into the water. So the fishing boat breaching the perimeter, triggers this big alarm, and the security officer is kind of taking care of it. And Evrim and Ha take shelter in this hotel that's been converted to a research facility. And they have this long conversation. And I thought it was interesting here that, a different fishing vessel, earlier in the novel had also breached the perimeter and been destroyed by Altentetzig, and Ha was really, really upset about it, and really, really raked her friend or her associate over the coals about it, and was like, I can't believe, that you would do this. You murdered those people. She didn't know that some of the fishing vessels had slave crew, who got murdered in this attack. And in contrast, when the sea wolf breaches and it's being taken down, Ha finds herself too tired to care, and she goes to sleep. So a little bit hypocritical there. She does end up feeling like the violence is justified for the safety of her and Evrim and the octopi. There's this particular octopus that they observe communicating with the other octopus, and they start calling her the shape singer. Because the octopus have this symbolic language that they project on the surface of their skin, which is really interesting. It's cool stuff. That's the reason to read the book. We'll ruin it for you.
And then a Rustum chapter will begin. You'll be like,
yeah. You just get to hear about what an awesome hacker he is. Evrim tells Ha something really interesting. Makes a confession. Evrim says, just an hour or so before we met, something very strange happened to me. I believe you would call it a dream, but I cannot have dreams because I don't sleep, call it a vision. And in the vision, Evrim is in a cafe in Istanbul sitting with a young man in a gray sweater. The young man is Rustem, introduces himself by name, and he tells Evrim all about the job he was hired to do, to hack into Evrim's mind and find a back door in order to murder someone. Question mark. We don't know who that was, but presumably Arnkatla. They wanted to protect an animal from you, a species. He tells Evrim that he found the portal but killed the woman who hired him for the job. Then he says, when I enter a code into this terminal, the portal in your mind will be destroyed and you will no longer be vulnerable. Not in this way. Nobody will be able to control what you think or say or do ever again. And Evrim tells Ha that Arnkatla's lack of faith in him was what led her to build them with the back door in the first place, which made Evrim then a danger to everyone. Her unwillingness to allow me to make my own choices, her fear of what those choices might be, her need to control me, is what Evrim enumerates. And then by this time, Arnkatla has arrived at Kandau. And there's just a whole bunch of bullshit associated with that. And Evrim tells Ha that they feared that the reason why Arnkatla finally came to the island was because she detected that the portal, Evrim's portal, was no longer available to her, and that she really wanted to shut Evrim down. And Evrim says, I have a right to remain alive and defend myself. And if she tries to shut me down, I'm going to kill her. And Ha, says that she'll help if it comes to that. So they've really bonded with each other, I guess. And she confides a story about her childhood to Evrim, and they wind up holding hands together while they wait for Altan Tsitseg to finish destroying the sea wolf. I thought it was interesting. Ha is kind of painted as someone who has really kind of shut herself away from other people. She has Cameron, her 0.5, and she decides that Cameron is not what she needs, and she ends up actually destroying the device that Cameron is in, and she kind of bonds with Evrim instead. And it's not, it's interesting because it doesn't seem like a romantic connection. It seems like a friendship connection, but it also it seemed a little forced, I guess. It didn't seem like there was a lot of chemistry there.
Mm-hmm.
So, A for concept, yeah. C for execution.
So I don't understand why everyone hates Evrim so much. Mm-hmm. I don't get it. Like, as soon as he's created, there's riots. There's gunmen storming the headquarters of the company. There's offices that are bombed. The VPs are assassinated. A man self-immolates himself. And then they made laws making artificial life illegal immediately. And they banned Evrim to Kandau to get him away from everyone. Is Evrim actually dangerous in some way, or he's just an android? I'd totally be Evrim's friend. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, Evrim it seems like a pretty benign individual. Yeah, I mean,
And the book describes all this outrage and all the protests, but it never really describes why everyone hates him so much. There's a couple of passages that are talking about Arnkatla. It says, she wanted to create a mind that could learn perfectly and totally, a mind free from forgetfulness, from the need to rest or search for food, a mind that could contemplate every moment it had ever experienced with perfect recall and use that knowledge. She knew this wouldn't be acceptable to the rest of the world. Why not?
Why not? Yeah, I mean, the book kind of just tells us that there's this outrage and doesn't really make a case for why, just that it
the
happened.
Only thing I could find, the only thing I could find that was any way descriptive of why people were upset was this passage, which says, this was why the world would never build another humanoid AI. The smile was perfect, referring to Evrim has just smiled. The smile was perfect, sincere, unaffected, fully human. And because of that, the smile was like the shadow of your own death. Evrim's existence implicated yours. It implied you, too, were nothing more than a machine, a swarm of pre-programmed impulses iterating endlessly. If Evrim was a conscious thing, then maybe you were made as well. a construct of different materials, a skeleton walking around, sheathed in meat, fooled into thinking it has free will, a thing that has occurred by accident, or a thing made on a whim to see what could be done. So I'm what would probably, like, I hate philosophy, honestly. I think you like philosophy more than I do. You've actually studied philosophy. I took like one philosophy of mind course in my undergrad, and I determined that I did not like philosophy. But my position can probably be categorized as a reductive position, which states that the mind is not separate from biological processes. We just don't understand the biological processes in enough detail yet to truly understand the mechanisms and how it all works together. So to me, none of that is really all that concerning. And it's actually really cool that we managed to create something that's anywhere near as complex as our own mind. So I don't understand why this is a threat to humanity. But I also had that sentiment in like these philosophy courses with my classmates. And they're all like, well, you're taking all the humanity out of existence. I was like, no, I'm not. I'm trying to understand how we work. That doesn't mean, just because we don't understand how it works doesn't make it magic. It works somehow.
Yeah,
but
the only way I can see people getting really mad about an android existing would be if the android told them that they should wear masks during cold and flu season.
Because reductive positions tend to be dismissed as too mechanistic. But like we're just figuring out how it works, right? But like sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, but once you understand it, it seems a little bit less mystical. And like in biology, introductory biology, I learned that our bodies are basically just bags of amino acids and enzymes that are all sloshing around, and occasionally they stick together and cause a reaction. It was just like, oh, that's how we work.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I had a moment. It was a couple of summers ago, where I was sitting out in front of my house, and there was a praying mantis outside. I think praying mantises are really cool because they're the only insect that you can really tell when they're looking at you. Like you can make eye contact with them, which I find interesting. And I just remember sitting there thinking, we're two highly unlikely agglomerations of molecules like sharing this moment, like looking at each other. It was a profound moment for me. But yeah, I mean, that's, self-aware bags of mostly water.
Yep.
There we go. Let's see. So where were we? There's the sea wolf crashes into Condau and gets destroyed. Something attacks the hotel. And it turns out it was the octopi. They threw tiles at the front of the hotel, and they actually also got into her control tank, her tank where she submerses and controls her drones from. They tore up the wiring.
Which she has to do naked, by the way. She must be naked, and we must describe her being naked every single fucking time. And
I guess I skimmed past it. It just was like, whatever. Yeah, so they tore up her tank. They find she designs this special like cloaking submersible that they use to investigate the Thai ship wreckage where the octopi sort of have their home base. They find that, they tear it to pieces, and they use the pieces to spell out their symbol that the research team concludes means something like "get out" or "fuck off," or whatever. So they definitely were trying to send a message. But Altensitseg thinks that what set the octopi off wasn't anything that the research team did. She thinks it was the sea wolf. And the octopus just were not making any distinction between the different groups of people. They know that there were people on the fishing ship and there are people on the research team in the hotel, and it's all the same to them. They're just like, stop messing with us. You're disturbing us. Get out of here.
I think they have a point, though. Mm-hmm. Like, we've been the people on the island were going down there and poking at them and drawing symbols on the ground and all sorts of stuff, and then all of a sudden a bomb goes off overhead. Mm-hmm. But you're going to assume it's the guys on the island. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there was no reason for the octopus to think otherwise, that those things were not linked. So anyway, so the octopus wreck shit. Arnkatla had been out for a run at the time that the sea wolf breaches the perimeter. So they don't know where she is at this moment in time. And Altansetseg says, well, my drones are going to find her, but I really wish she was here for this. And this is the kicker, because she announces that from this moment, the Buddhist Republic of Tibet is seizing Kandao following our takeover of the criminal DIANIMA enterprise. She tells Evrim and Ha that they're under arrest. And the next thing that happens is an octopus emerges from the saltwater pool outside the hotel and beelines for Ha, showing her a symbol on its mantle. It is an image of Ha's own face, and it leaves her a thing behind as it's on its way back to the ocean. It leaves her an octopus beak. She drops it on the ground.
I think we missed, there was an earlier scene where Ha had drawn a symbol on the ground.
Yes.
To try to communicate with the octopuses. The octopuses drew one back, so she went down there to take a look at it. And the octopus shows up and hands her, kind of rips her mask off and puts something in the mask, which is not the nicest way of handing something to you, but hands her a little piece of coral that's been carved into the shape of a human. So that was her first interaction with this octopus that she has named the Shape Singer.
Right. Yeah. So that was a meaning. They don't exactly know what meaning to ascribe to that, but the octopus offers them this thing, this shaped object, and they've concluded that the octopus are making tools. The cloaking submersible discovers, sort of deep within the wreckage of the ship that at Kandao, that the octopus have this chamber that's full of bones, human skulls and bones and stuff that have etchings on their surfaces, which is maybe they think, maybe some kind of religious thing, maybe. They're not sure. So this is the meaningful thing. The next thing that happens after the Shape Singer shows Ha, the picture of her face, is that the drones find Arnkatla. She is laying on the beach. She is dead. There's some footage that shows a pair of octopus, coming up the beach and just running over her, basically, and murdering her incidentally on their way to the water. And Evrim concludes they don't really see us. We're nothing to them, an impediment to their movement or something to be avoided, something to be chased away, a source of pretty bone for riding on. They killed her simply because she was in the way. And Evrim's kind of oh, well, too bad, so sad. And everybody moves on. They just kind of accept that this is the thing that happens. I liked my initial thought upon finding out that Arnkatla had been killed by the octopus, which was that they murdered her because she was a bad person. So, yeah, and these are the last two chapters of the book that I'm talking about here. And so we've just found out that Tibet has been, that Altansetseg has been a double agent the whole time, and she's been working for Tibet. And they've taken over Kandao, and they were the people who were dismantling DIANIMA and buying off the subsidiaries and stuff like that. It's not clear whether or not the Abglans lady was also working on behalf of Tibet or not, or was part of some radical environmentalist organization. Big question mark there. I don't know. And that whole thing happens so late in the book, and it's so sudden that you don't really have much of an opportunity to reflect on what happened before in the book and to kind of rethink. Yeah, it's just it was unsatisfying to me. So
yeah, for the amount of info dumping there was, there wasn't a lot of action. So.
Yeah, and the end is really abrupt. There is an epilogue where Aiko and San make it onto the beach in Kandao, and they bump into the Otto monks, the Tibetan Otto monks. One of the Otto monks is coming up the shore. He's got a basket of sea turtles, baby sea turtles. And Aiko's please help me. I'm in pain. I need help. And the monk is we'll help you. Everyone has refuge here, but help me, get these sea turtles to the water first. And Iko happens to notice that stenciled on the side of the life raft is property of Automated Marine Protein Industries, Inc., a DIANIMA Group subsidiary. Sad trombone. Well, Iko had wanted to work for DIANIMA, and he had gotten what he wanted.
And at some point in this whole episode, or not in that, like in the denouement, I suppose, or how are you supposed to pronounce that word? Denouement? They're saying that someone has been buying up all of the DIANIMA properties and like basically trying to buy them out. And the book says, oh, they've been buying up subsidiaries we didn't even realize we had. It's like, what kind of business are you running? You don't even know what your subsidiaries are.
I was really irritated by that note. I mean, not that Arnkatla says, that the company is half the size it had been a year previously because of these buyouts. But also because they're like, well, you're here on this island. There's no communication in or out. How is DIANIMA running? And she gets really snippy with them. And she's like, I don't run the day-to-day, doings of this business. That's not my journey. I trust the people that I've hired, to manage the company, to keep making the decisions that they're making. And it's like, well, the decisions that they're making have resulted in half of your company, being dissolved. So that doesn't really like hang together. And so I guess that does kind of maybe add to Evrim's, conclusion that Arnkatla was really there to try and shut Evrim off, because it didn't really make sense for her to just suddenly be there. Evrim really has a lot of sore feelings about Arnkatla, which seem justified. And it's weird that, Ha has such a good relationship with Evrim and likes Evrim genuinely and feels like, she's bonded with them. But at the same time, like she can't seem to think of Arnkatla as being a bad person. She's, Arnkatla is kind of small of stature. She's always dressed like she's about to go for a run, because that's like her hobby is going for runs. And, she shows up, she has like a cake. She gives everybody a piece of cake when she shows up. She's just like this, this ordinary kind of person. And she's maybe a little clinical and a little abrupt, but she doesn't seem like a villainess, I guess. And so then there's kind of that ambiguity, that exists throughout the whole book. Like nothing is, completely bad or completely good. Everything has to be taken in context.
I started referring to Arnkatla as GLaDOS through that whole section. Because it's like, and I think I've got this note from my Kindle notes here. I think this is Arnkatla talking. I'm not clear, but it says, "We hate rivals, competitors. Every time one has emerged, we have destroyed them. I know very well what will happen when the soap bubble, as you put it, this delicate membrane I have managed to build around this precious place, is punctured. And that's why I'm here, because we are running out of time." And this whole, she's like basically monologuing her evil plan to monetize making better brains or something. It was very unclear. But and they're talking about how Arnkatla is going to just heartlessly grab all the octopuses and slice them open and try to figure out how their brains work so she can monetize it. And the whole time I'm just thinking of GLaDOS and Portal and the song where it's like, "For the good of all of us except the ones who are dead." And then you make a neat gun, and it's like, oh
yeah, Arnkatla really is kind of a wire mother. Not a real touchy-feely kind of a person. I mean, at least Arnkatla wasn't trying to claim that she was doing what she was doing for the good of humanity, right? I mean, she was very centered on wanting to design a better mind. That's like her whole mission, is to design the perfect mind. And I think the plan with the octopus wasn't necessarily to monetize them, but it was to gather data from them in order to build a better mind. Right. I mean, I guess the thought was that the octopus would have different methods of transmitting information to each other, and that maybe that could be, converted into some kind of technology. which maybe could be monetized, but I don't think that was Arnkatla's primary interest, because she's not a money person, right? She's not a finance person. She's a scientist. She's a researcher who also seems to be like fabulously wealthy, and I don't know.
And doesn't even know what subsidiaries her company has.
She's,
it's just a company. We do things.
She's the Tony Stark of being a bitch.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of like, there's more stuff that I could talk about, but I mean that's those are the high points, and that's kind of, those are the themes that I picked out as being the most important themes, like empathy versus indifference, and decision making in a vacuum being a bad thing. And
I didn't really pick out themes. I mostly picked out things I was annoyed about.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
There's a quote that I highlighted. It says, "Science often dismisses our individual experiences, what it feels like to smell an orange or to be in love, as qualia." And I was like, what do you mean dismisses them as qualia? It describes them as qualia. That's the whole point of qualia. It describes our subjective qualitative experiences. What do you mean dismisses? I don't understand what point they're trying to make here. And then it just keeps making sweeping statements that annoyed me, like, "Nowhere else do we see this level of sophisticated tool use in the animal kingdom." And they're talking about humans. It's not quite true. Corvids, dolphins, apes have all been seen using tools. Granted, they're not smithing like metallurgy or anything, but some might argue like, oh, they're just using rocks and sticks in an opportunistic fashion. That's not, only humans can make tools, but even that's not true. Apes have been seen modifying sticks to turn them into tools, including spears, which they use for hunting sometimes. Corvids have been seen fashioning hooks, like to pull things out from other things. They don't even have thumbs. So it's not a matter of craftsmanship versus opportunity. They are making tools.
And many kinds of animals.
Certainly not as advanced. But.
Many kinds of animals are observed in play behavior, which is also considered a pretty sophisticated behavior, right? Considering that it's an action that is undertaken without any particular goal or objective in mind. It's not a productive activity. I think even bees have been observed playing.
Yeah. The octopuses in this book were described as playing, but the game they were playing, it actually sounded really awful. They had a little pit with the crabs that they were presumably eating, because some of them are missing parts of their claws and all sorts of things. And they'd rush out from everything and flip over a crab and then rush back. And then another one would rush in and flip over a different crab. And it's like, oh, so they're playing a game. But like, these poor freaking crabs are in this pit of hell where they can't get out, and they're having bits of them torn off, and then they're being used, they're flipped over, and it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, it was a little upsetting. But I have a cat, so I know all about that kind of thing.
Well, that's another note I had down here. Another sweeping statement that annoyed me is that imagination is something that no non-linguistic animal has. Like, what? My cats attack imaginary mice all the time. What's the difference?
Yeah, that's a questionable. That seems like a really questionable statement to me.
Like, and how would you know that they don't have imagination? Like, that's you can't make a statement like that. You can't make a.
You can't know that.
And it also states, culture, not consciousness, is what we are searching for. We're not searching for other minds or other selves, which are everywhere, but other societies. Elephants have complex societal hierarchies and family structures. Yep. They grieve. They hold what we could consider to be a funeral for those who die in their family units. That could be argued to be emotional intelligence. Chimpanzees have hierarchies where they form organized hunting parties. And like I said, they form spears and all sorts of things. The top warriors in those hunting parties, the ones that were the most important for securing the kill, get to choose which cuts of meat they want from the kill. They sometimes use that meat as bribes or payment for favors. That's a society. That's practically a freaking economy. Yeah. So some of these statements just made me like, you can't say that in such a definitive fashion.
Yeah, it's out of context, certainly.
And then the book said, the octopus is in its stone age, or to be precise, its seashell age. And I just found that to be very anthropocentric and kind of patronizing.
Yeah, I think Ha even makes that remark in the book that calling it the seashell age was really, really anthropocentric. It was not considering them on their own terms, rather considering them comparing them against.
And there was another section where Ha mentioned they were observing the shape singer through the submersible drone, and they could see it standing there changing all its shapes and everything for a group of other octopuses, young octopuses or whatever. And Ha decides that it's actually a poem. And I found that to be a little bit anthropocentric as well. Like you could say it's something similar to a poem, but saying, oh yeah, it's a poem, it is like, no, it's not a poem. It's octopus language.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did think that the research team was pretty careful, to make it clear that their conclusions about what the octopus were doing were, conjecture. And Ha very much is like, well, we're attempting to communicate, we can't, draw a specific, we can't conclude that there's a specific message being transmitted here. We're just, making an effort. We're just showing that we see them communicating and that we want to try and communicate back with them. We're not at the point where we understand, syntax and vocabulary and stuff like that, intonation, or the equivalent of intonation or anything like that. What did we learn? What did we learn, Nico?
So I learned that if you create artificial life, people will self-immolate and assassinate all of your C-level executives. So it's better to just stick to milking the economy and gutting everyone's freedoms for personal gain. Because nobody cares.
You might as well just make like a fake AI and monetize it in the App Store and profit. Don't go farther than that. I learned not to trust Goodreads reviews. Just what I learned. Oh boy. Do you recommend this book? To whom would you recommend this book?
I don't recommend this book. I don't know who I would recommend this book to. My comparable is actually Blindside by Peter Watts, which did a very similar deep dive into intelligence without consciousness, or how consciousness might work, and it uses thought experiments like the Chinese room. So it's a very similar sort of exploration, but it did it better.
In terms of
except it has vampires for some reason.
Being a narrative, it's much superior work of prose. Certainly, I couldn't come up with any comparables for this. I will put some references down to the film Wolf Larsen and to Mikhail Bakunin, Rustam's hacker nickname that he denies several times, or a person named Bakunin, who was a contemporary of Karl Marx, a writer and a thinker, which may be interesting. I don't know. I wasn't able to come up with any literary or any film, comparables. This book just exhausted me. It just exhausted me. I wouldn't say that I enjoyed this book. I thought the octopus stuff was really cool. I like a lot of the ideas that went into this. It was a frustrating read. It was a really frustrating read. I felt that it didn't quite cohere as a novel. So A for concept, maybe like B-, C+ for execution. But I would read books that explore similar themes. I would be happy to do that. I think octopi are cool. That's what I think.
Scrolling through my notes and finding more things that I was annoyed about.
Yeah. Well, do you want to take a moment in case you have any parting thoughts to share? Or anything that you just really
that aren't just complaining
about
the things that were said in this book?
Is there anything that you just really need to get off your chest?
Actually, so there's this whole idea in the book about octopus limbs being separate from the brain. Did you have any thoughts about that?
I thought that was interesting. So they talk a little bit about how an octopus's appendages can kind of act independently of the central brain and kind of pass information back. And a comparison is made to the Tibetan drone technology, which is they call it a holon. And it seems like Alten Tsetzeg was actually the developer of that. They don't really drop that tidbit until the last, little bit of the book where you kind of put the pieces together and figure out that she's like the Tibetan AI hacker.
Oh, by the way, I'm also awesome at
Right,
hacking.
yeah. I'm not only 6 feet tall, but I am an amazing hacker.
I'm not only huge and beautiful and badass with, scars that show you how badass I am, and sometimes I'm tortured, but also I'm naked all the time. Yeah, the writing in this book just annoys me so much.
The Tibetan holon drones they're semi-autonomous. They have artificial intelligence. They can sort of make their own decisions and operate independently, but also, pass information back to a central controller that can opt to kind of step in and take control of them. And they kind of drop this hint that Alten Tsetzeg actually sort of identifies with the octopus because she's operating these semi-autonomous, drones all the time, and she just really identifies with that that mode of being,
So I'm honestly surprised that this book didn't get into split brains. Do you know anything about split brains?
No, I don't. Tell me about that.
So split brains are really interesting, and is one of the things that really grabbed me in my undergrad. So your brain has something called the corpus callosum, which connects the two hemispheres of your brain. It's like a little. It's almost like an Ethernet cable that connects the two, so you can send data back and forth. It's a very nerdy way of describing it, but it's how information goes back and forth. And we have a very long history of not knowing how brains work, but chopping them up anyway. So they were looking at people with epilepsy, like really severe epilepsy, like unsurvivable epilepsy, like you just cannot function because you're having seizures all the time. And they discovered that a lot of electricity was going back and forth across the corpus callosum, so they decided to chop it off and see what helped. And it actually does help. And so I don't know that much about epilepsy, but I'm sure there's probably more information about it nowadays. But
they can sever that channel.
Yeah, my understanding of epilepsy is it's basically like signal overload. Like there's too much going on and your brain just kind of short circuits. So when they cut the corpus callosum and stop that extra information from going back and forth, it actually did help the epilepsy, and the people were able to be functional. But of course, then they have other problems because we just chopped part of your brain in half.
We just reached a needle up your nose and kind of dug around up there, and
Yeah, so they studied these people who have this to see what's going on, obviously. And what they found was that the two halves of the brain could no longer communicate with each other. So that's how we know that that's information going back and forth. And our speech center is typically on the right side. And so when split brain patients are shown an image that only the left half of their eye or the left half of their brain can see, because your eyes are like associated with a hemisphere of your brain. I think they actually cross over. But when you can only see something with your left side of your brain, they can't name what they're seeing. And the same effect occurs for like visual pairs and reasoning. This is a quote that I pulled out of a research paper. The patient's behavior became intriguing when the stimuli were presented in the left visual field or in the left hand. The patient, or at least the verbal left hemisphere, appeared oblivious to the fact that there had been a stimulus at all, but was nevertheless able to select the correct object from an array of alternatives. So the patient is like, I don't see anything, but their hand points to the correct object and is like, it's that one. And it's pointing at it.
Oh, weird.
The person themselves doesn't seem consciously aware of the stimulus, but their brain got the information and controlled the hand, even though they don't actually realize that their hand is pointing at the right object or even what the object is. That's fucking wild, right? When we watched videos of it in class, the patient themselves, like they just got this like bug-eyed, like, what is my hand doing expression on their face, like, whoa, like, and so it brought up this whole question of like, where is your consciousness actually residing? Does the brain have two consciousnesses, one for the two halves of the brain and all this? So when I was researching for this, I pulled up a fairly recent literature review, actually, on the state of that field. It's from May 2020, so pretty recent. It was a really great lit review. It's by DeHaan et al. And this quote is regarding whether the two consciousnesses is actually a thing. Does a split brain harbor a split consciousness, or is consciousness unified? The current consensus is that the body of evidence is insufficient to answer this question, and different suggestions are made with respect to how future studies might address this paucity. In addition, it is suggested that the answers might not be a simple yes or no, but that intermediate conceptualizations need to be considered. So in other words, the state of our knowledge as of 2020 is still, fuck if we know, and also it's complicated. And there's another quote saying, everyday experiences of the patient and their close ones suggest that only one person exists in a split brain. So it's not like multiple people living in your brain, but the consciousness does seem to work and communicate to to collaborate to create goals or to get to goals. And when the communication lines are severed, it has to get creative to get the information back and forth. So like the left side of the left hand of that person knew the information, but the verbal center didn't know it, and it didn't have the direct route to get that information back and forth. So if we go back to the book, the quote from the book is, "It is as if your limbs are constantly moving of their own accord, exploring the world around you, thinking for themselves. You're watching them move, observing their actions. That's not quite right. You're in a state of feeling and observing." And then Evram says, "It seems dangerous, that level of passivity in the center. It seems like your limbs would get you into trouble. It makes octopuses the ultimate multitaskers." So the book is relating it to multitasking, but I feel like it's more like a well-organized organization or government, really. And then Ha says, "If those limbs can regenerate when they get lopped off for being too curious, it's really helpful. Luckily for the octopuses, they can grow their limbs back just as good as new." So it's just like a military. You send your soldiers out to explore and they get waxed. You just hire new soldiers, right? I found that to be a compelling parallel, but it makes you think, what is going on in our bodies? What if we are actually, there's like a theory, it's kind of a far out theory, but what if we are actually a society of cells that work together like a coordinated government? And what does that mean for our understandings of our bodies? So the cells of that guy's left hand, and this is a very simplified boiling down of it, but if the cells on the guy's left hand that could identify the correct object were a different unit from the cells near the verbal center, but they couldn't communicate directly because the communication lines were severed. But they were all working together to create one body that's trying to get to goals. And that's again, back to the slime molds, because I love slime molds. But slime molds work in a similar way. They are single-celled amoebas, but that puddle of slime that creates the slime mold is actually a colony of amoebas that all work together. So when they get a signal that, oh, there's food over there, it puts a little branch out that's like an arm. That's actually a whole bunch of little cells working together to create a branch. And once they've found the food, they make like a little chain to transport the food back and forth to the main colony in the center of the body of the slime mold. So we have absolutely no evidence of how things work yet, but I would not be surprised if people started finding more evidence that we are actually colonies of cells rather than a consciousness floating around in a brain. I don't know what that means for consciousness. I have no idea.
Yeah,
I'm punching way out of my way here.
It's an interesting thing to think about. It makes me feel a little bit paranoid. Like, what if something happened? What if there was a usurper? And
isn't that what cancer is?
Yeah.
Fuck you, cancer.
Oh.
Get out of my body.
What if something?
Well, cancer is a cell that broke. But
what if something usurped my consciousness? What if? Yeah.
Well, cordyceps.
Yeah.
Toxoplasmosis.
Cordyceps.
Yeah, COVID, possibly.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Are we ready to wrap things up?
I suppose I could bitch about more things, but there's not important.
You could just email me after we're done. Just email me for days and days. Oh yeah,
I'll just send you my notes, and you can.
Okay, so you can follow us on Twitter at RobotElfBZPod. We're on Tumblr and YouTube as Robot Elf Book Club. If you'd like to correspond with us, you can send an email to robotelfbookclub@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. In January, we'll be back with a review of our most anticipated titles of 2023, and we'll also do some bite-sized book reviews of what we read over the winter break. We'll see you next time.